Hi guys, this is a really nasty weather outside and it's raining as you see, and it's windy and it is cold, but I still could find this outdoors cafe to cover me from the rain and still talk to you. And that is quite an important point that I want to make today and answer some comment. And it's funny that this weather is quite the opposite to the video, to the weather that was in that video, to the comment to which I want to answer. That was a really bright, sunny, warm day, and today is quite the opposite. So what's that? The previous video was about the central focusing point, and I explained why it's the best overall, because it gets the most light and thus it is the most accurate. And you could, even if you don't have many focusing points, you can use the central one because it's always the best. And you can use the technique which is called focus and recompose. So, focus with your central point and then move your camera to recompose the way you like. But there was that one guy who commented under that video, and he had a really good point, that you can get out of focus by recomposing. And so, using the central focusing point may not be the best choice. And how's that? Well, actually he's right, because the focusing is the matter of distance to the subject. It's not moving left, right, up or down, it's moving closer or further to the subject, either by, turning the focusing ring on your lens, which makes the lenses move and so focusing closer or further away, or by your foot. You can actually focus by literally stepping closer to a subject or backing up. And so, if you use the central focusing point and you grab your subject and you're focused on your subject, and then you move, let me grab a camera, and then you move your camera, you can get out of focus by how? The focus is actually the focal plane, so it's like the vertical wall, and if you get slightly further or closer, then you can get out of focus, as I have explained. And so, if you say focus with the central point, but start to move your camera for recomposing, you see, actually there is, let's call it the central point of the focus, and if I move it, it actually slightly moves further or closer to the subject. And if you accidentally move really closer or further, you can really get out of focus. But there is some explanation to that. And first, of course, with the big depth of field, so the plane blurred before the point of focus and the blurred background, the foreground and blurred foreground and background, and the distance between that, it's quite subjective, but it's called the depth of field. So when your subject looks like really in focus, in sharp focus. And if you have a big depth of field, say with the dark apertures like f5.6 or f8 or darker, if you have a really long distance to your subject, like many meters away, or with the wide-angle lenses when you have a lot of things in focus, then it may not be such a problem, really. But if you have really shallow depth of field, like few centimeters, or even, maybe even few millimeters with some lenses, like with macro or with the very close-up photography, it can really be a problem. So if you move your camera and you are slightly further and closer to the subject, yes, you can get out of focus. But why it may not be the problem and how to counteract this, and why you still better use the central focusing point. Let me remind you that we're talking DSLR cameras here. It is not such a problem with mirrorless cameras these days, because they can actually focus over overall sensor of the whole, light gathering matrix itself from corner to corner. Of course, I explained to you in the previous video that the central area is still going to be the most sensitive and the most accurate, but still, in mirrorless cameras, it's mostly not a problem. We are talking DSLR cameras. We're shooting with DSLR camera now, and this is DSLR as well. So, yes, you can get out of focus by recomposing. But there are 3 points I would like to mention about this. And first is your photography skills. It's always important to have skills. If you develop your skills, then many problems just go away. And first, if you shoot a lot, if you shoot with focusing and recomposing a lot, you just get skilled. You just realize your depth of field and you understand how much you can move and how much you should not move. And the skill is really important. It doesn't matter technologies or cameras and stuff. the skill is always important. So if you're experienced in that, then you really know how much you should and should not move. And I've went through that myself on my own experience, like when I was shooting, when I was, just beginning into the photography. And as well when I went out with my, friends or families, and I asked them to shoot me or shoot anything with cameras like 5D original with, say, only 9 focusing points, of which one central is cross type and the only accurate and the most precise auto-focusing point. And I told them that you can focus with a central point and then move your camera to recompose. And that's what they did, and they got out of focus, actually. That's why they were not accurate, they were not careful with that, and they moved further or closer and they got out of focus. But if you develop experience and if you develop the skill, you can learn how to live with that. So first, photographer's skill is, first and foremost. Well, of course, it takes a lot of time. And if you are inexperienced, then let's get to the second point, which is actually calculating your depth of field and working from that. And how you do that? As I've told you, there is some distance between the blurred background and blurred foreground. Like here, you see the background is blurred and so the foreground is blurred as well, but there is something in the middle, like my face, which is in focus, and there is some distance between this and that. And if you calculate that, then you can actually assess how much you can move back and forth. Now, where the camera is tracking my face, it's not a problem, and this is what's happening mostly in mirrorless cameras or in DSLR cameras over live view, especially like here with the Canon dual pixel autofocus. It's doing tremendous job. It gets rid of the problem whatsoever, but we're talking DSLRs with central focusing, most accurate focusing point. So how we calculate that? Well, it's actually quite objective. If the skill, the photographer's skill, is subjective, then the method that I'm trying to propose you is quite objective. And that's using the depth of field calculator, the real application, which you can download for your computer, your laptop, or your phone, actually. It's just the application that calculates your depth of field in centimeters or even in millimeters. So you download the application and you enter your lens model, your focal length or your aperture. It depends on the application. So you enter some, information, and the program, the application actually calculates your depth of field in centimeters or in millimeters. So you know in exact figures, in exact numbers, how much can you move further or closer not to get out of focus. And of course, it can be used when you have time. If you're not into photojournalism, when you have just seconds to take pictures. But if you're not in a hurry, you're in a portraiture, or you are at the studio, and you have, at least 1 minute, it doesn't take much time. It takes about 1 minute to enter this information into, application and calculate your depth of field. Then you know the exact figures, how much you can get further or closer away from the lens, so not to get out of focus while recomposing. So that's the second method. Well, first is the exact photographer's skill. The second point is the third-party skill, which is the outsourced, so to say, application for calculating depth of field. And then finally we get to the third point that I want to make is the camera technology. There are some technologies that, of course, help you track the subject and get in focus and not miss it. But even having some technologies, you can still use the central, most accurate focusing point. Now, how's that? I'm mostly Canon shooter, and I'm not familiar with many, photographic systems, but I'm quite familiar with Nikon now, because one of my subscribers actually gifted me Nikon D7000, and I really fell in love with that. And that was the moment when I got familiar with the feature, with the Nikon feature, which is called 3D tracking. And there's actually nothing precisely like that in Canon world. Yes, there are different tracking methods in Canons, of course, and the most maybe advanced of them is EOS ITR, which is EOS Intelligent Tracking and Recognition. And it can track the subjects judging by the color and the contrast. But it's not always accurate, and it doesn't work like the Nikon system, which I consider the more advanced thing, even in such old cameras like D7000. And I know this feature is in probably all the advanced and recent Canon, Nikon cameras. And of course, let me remind you, we are talking about DSLRs, not mirrorless. And it works over the optical viewfinder. So if you're working in live view, even in old cameras, with dual pixel like in Canon or with the Nikon or other systems, contrast detection, yes, you can still focus on any subject in any part of the frame or nearly any part of the frame. But when we are shooting over the optical viewfinder, you can still use central focusing point for recomposition, and it's still gonna be more accurate. And how the 3D tracking in Nikon works, there is your central focusing point in Nikon cameras, and you use it to pick up the subject. So you focus on with the central point on your subject, and you keep your shutter button halfway down for tracking. And if you start to recompose, then the subject that you picked up with the central point is tracked with other focusing point. So yes, you can tell me that, well, these are different focusing points. This is not the central that I continue to track when you move, your frame and you start recomposing. Yes, but you still pick up your subject with the central focusing point, which is the most accurate. So still, picking up your subject with the 3D tracking like in Nikon cameras is still gonna be the most precise and most accurate to, pick up your subject and then track it with the other focusing points. So even in this scenario, the central focusing point is still the best. So to sum up all that I said, of course, you can get out of focus by focusing and recomposing with the central focusing point. But first, if you are skilled and if you develop your skills, if you have the application, the phone app for calculating your depth of field, and third, if you use advanced technologies like EOS ITR in Canons or 3D tracking in Nikons, you can still use the central focusing point to your advantage. Even if you don't have many of the focusing points, well, the central focusing point will still be the most accurate of all and the most precise. So that's all I wanted to clarify for you for today. And, if you like the information, just subscribe to my channel. Of course, press some like, don't forget, and leave a comment below if you have any other comments, if you want to oppose me, if you want to get, leave me some other notes and maybe get more detailed clarifications, you are welcome. Just leave it down in the comments below. Paul Kretz was with you. See you in the other videos. Or maybe not. It's up to you.